Да, мы, ну, давайте сейчас не в эфире. Да, я написала в чате, что да. Да.
Ладно, тогда у нас перерыв 5 минут, да?
Перерыв, да, ну, 10 минут. Я сейчас подключу следующих
Да.
спикеров.
Хорошо, спасибо, сейчас увидимся.
and we can start. Thank you. My name is Fekla Tolstaya. I will be asking questions to our wonderful speakers who have joined us today, and we have started a little bit before for our time. We have 50 minutes, and I hope that we will have enough time uh, for all the items in our agenda. So we are talking about green transformations, and we will now talk about three things: the museum, the city, and the garden, the orchard. Intangible legacy. That's orchards is intangible legacy, and I think this discussion will be really useful for both museum specialists and the people coming from other fields. Our today's guests are Natalia Nikitina from Kolomna. Natalia, could you please raise your hands through the Zoom? Raise your hand. Okay. Natalia Nikitina from Kolomna, a social entrepreneur, director general of the Kolomna Center for Development and Educational Tourism. She is the leader and founder of a huge museum network in Kolomna, and the orchard topic is linked to other things that Natasha is dealing with and her colleagues are. Well, we all know the Kolomna Pastila Museum. The pastila is the sweet, which is sweets made of apples from apple orchards, and well, I hope that Natalia will mention that in her presentation today. And our colleague from the United Kingdom, Kath Rosen from London. Kath, could you please raise your hand so we can see you? Kath is the Director General of the Orchard Project Foundation. She works with various institutions and organizations, both in UK and outside in Africa, including Zimbabwe. And Kath, I think, will talk to us about partnership projects with various corporations and sponsors, so on and so forth, and tell us about how this work fits our general understanding of the ecological fields and aware of the ideas of awareness, community, so on and so forth. So Natalia will start, I guess, and I will ask her to introduce her project and to present it. The Kolomna Fasad Museum have started researching, I think it was 10 years ago. They have been researching gardening and horticulture in Kolomna in the past, and you use that research to plan your activities on revitalizing city gardens and orchards. Well, what have you achieved in that time? What was the impact? Practical impacts. What has changed in people's attitudes? Those are the questions that I really want to hear answers to. Natalia, you might want to switch your mic on. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I'm happy to see you. Fekla mentioned the fact that we carried out research 12 years ago. Well, time flies like one day. Our first museum had to do with manufacturing and the craft of pastila sweets in Kolomna. We thought about, the raw resources and the product and why it happened in Kolomna. So we decided to commission a research. We commissioned it from the local university about the history of horticulture and orchardry in this region. And we were really surprised when we received this small essay, and we found out that the first orchard in Kolomna is dated by 1372. You know, the 14th century. That does surprise one. And another interesting fact was that we actually can locate this garden. We know what it was, and it was quite close to where McDonald's is in today's Kolomna. And I will later on tell you what we thought about, have putting a mark or showing people where this oldest garden was or used to be. Green transformations, orchards, and vegetable growing and fruit growing is of great interest to us because we deal with the historical part of the city. And in the province, that's all still present. It's one-story buildings mostly. Each house has a front garden and a patch, and people do that. People have been doing that for a long time. And after starting the research and commissioning it, we found out that on the territory of the city, there used to be more than 400 gardens, orchards, and our next step, Dmitry Oynos, actually managed to find and locate traces of those gardens. And in some of the 400 spots, actually 30 gardens we identified that are historical, the gardens which came down to us from the depths of centuries. And we uh, devised and designed a route across those historical orchards and decided to show it both to the city residents and to the guests. Well, what does it look like today? It looks like a regular country house garden. Fokla, a great question. You see, there are places where you can't plant a new orchard. And we came up with the idea of marking historical gardens with three elements: a small shop, mm, the name of the garden, let's say Panfilov Garden, and we decided to plant an apple tree of a historical sort, to make some signs or to mark the territory with some information. We designed a sketch. We thought of how it should look like. However, we couldn't lead it to a final result so far. I hope so far, because the city has been very rigid in tracing the navigation and its outlook. We have, street signs on a cafe, for a cafe, 3 years of negotiations, and we haven't got the necessary permit yet. The leadership changes. Well, I won't tire you with these details. And well, it's not easy to get things done. But this first garden, the Panfilov garden, we came up with a nice idea and worked it through. As I said, now it's a McDonald's. There is a McDonald's on that spot. And on the 11th of September, we will have the Apple Festival. And I invite all of you. It has to do with, orchards and fruits and green. So the first step, I think, that we want to start a trend of showing or marking historical garden sites. We spoke to the owners and leadership of McDonald's, and they agreed to introduce an apple dessert into their menu to mark the history. And they decided to introduce an apple jelly. It's really, really refreshing, and it fits all the new nutritionist trends. So that's something that we are planning to do. In May, we will have a pre-party of the festival. We will plant the apple tree, and we will think of, how we take people there to McDonald's to taste the dessert. But specifically, the city administration was, kind of very eager to follow this orchard trend. They appropriated the idea, they said it's all their merits. The next step of the city administration was to say that this garden actually was planted next to the Kolomna subway station. Not subway, suburban train station. Well, I think for Russia, I don't know about the UK. It's a very good tool, to convince the bosses or the leadership that actually the idea is theirs, that it comes from them, and that will look good on their reports later on. Many of the projects that I was capable of making happen, that was exactly the tool that helped me. Behind Natalia, behind her back, we see a wonderful garden, but it's not the municipal authorities' garden, right? That wouldn't be their level. Natalia, you should switch on your mic, however. Would you switch on your mic, please?
Наташа Никитина, пожалуйста, включи микрофон.
Да.
Yes.
Да. Так, если не получается сад показать,
Нет, я
давай
нашла,
тогда дальше
нашла.
говори. Тогда давай.
Okay.
Совместное использование сейчас.
О, прекрасно.
Okay, I found the photo.
Сейчас мы видим твою переписку. О,
Вот видно?
да.
Yes.
Да.
Now we can see.
Администрация.
Да,
I hope this is the head of the city administration. Well, not the head, representative. It's me wearing this pink jacket. Actually, it's the or deputy head of the city utilities department. So what that garden what will it look like? Will there be a historical component to the garden? Yes, there will be a small plaque saying that there used to be a garden in the 19th century. Well, you can see me with planting this tree. Well, it's not an apple tree. It's a different tree, which is called a bird cherry. So, we want people, while they're waiting for the train, you see those lanes, right? Well, now actually it looks different. It looks even better now. So, before that, let me show you some other photographs. We have started green transformations with the places that we are renting, let's say, the sites that we don't need to get any permits inside our objects and sites. A garden next to the museum factory, explaining what plant each is every plant. Dmitry Borisovich designed this plant with aromatic herbs, typical for our tradition and region. And then we also conducted a big research. Dmitry Borisovich and students took a whole season it took them several months. Well, I can see that it's something delicious. Yes, it's apple jam. Well, could you send it over via Zoom to us? There are old apple trees in the garden. We have planted some new ones of historical sorts, of course. So we are very sensitive. Dmitry Borisovich is very sensitive to picking the sorts, the traditional apple tree sorts. Well, I have a question. Someone who comes to visit, how do they see that it's, that it's not just a garden, that it's a historical garden? And is there any sort of feedback? Do people sometimes say, wow, we haven't seen anything like that, we haven't heard about that sort of apple? So do you promote this sort of a history component, you know? I'm mentioning Dmitry Borisovich again. You know, he had a lectorium next to in the museum, in the garden, for the people who asked a lot of questions. So we organized this museum orchard school. The whole winter we have been giving reading lectures, not during the pandemic, of course, before that. And that is a place and a site of cultural exchange where people discuss various thoughts and growing techniques. And well, the fact that it is a museum garden is attested by these plates with the Latin names of the plants. And this lectorium, as I said, was our response to a request. This is our way of communicating with the community. Do you have a guided tour of the garden? Yes. At this museum factory, we had the gardener, a permanent gardener, who was in charge, and he was very happy to communicate. And if he saw people sitting down to smell a plant or to read, so there was not a written guided tour, but yes, Filkla, your question is really good. We have another museum, or in a neighboring address. I have some other photos from planting the trees in November, but I will not be showing you those. We have planted. We have laid down an apple garden according to a historical description of Ivan Lezhishnikov, with peonies and rose bushes, and at the kolkhoz, at the farm market, in the nursery, I saw a wonderful peony collections and sold by the owner of the collection, historical sorts. So I bought it and will plant it in our garden, and that will be a reconstruction of sorts of the garden of a columnar garden described by Ivan Lozhechnikov. So I think I will stop your presentation here for now. If I haven't cut your presentation short, but if you could allow me 2 more minutes, I would show another garden of ours. It's a museum case. It has to do with Kath Rosen, who actually visited Kolomna. I think she will like to see that. Do you recognize your colleagues? It was one of our festivals, and we have discussed this gardening topic. So we have those beautiful pictures of us planting the Anglitsky garden, the English garden. We have discovered historical documents saying that in 1772, on our territory, there was an English garden. So we don't have precise descriptions, but we asked our ambassador in England to help us bring historical sorts of English apples to Kolomna. In the Royal Nursery, we bought 5 young trees, and he helped us with diplomatic transportation. And we have actually planted those trees all together.
Просто не в ту сторону, наверное, немножко пошла я. Простите.
Интересные
I'll try
фотографии.
to scroll and find those. You've got some interesting photos as well.
Варенье Наташа покажет, то пастилу.
Да, соблазняю
Oh,
вас,
you can
да,
see
если
making
вот это вот
jams
просто
and
вот это вот.
marmalade.
Вернемся потом к тебе.
We'll
Просто
get
скажи,
back
Хорошо, всё, да-да-да,
just for
я
everyone to
вот
have
что начала?
time for
ну,
their
это английский
presentation.
сад, вот
So
таким он
this
был,
is our
да,
English garden. This
и
is how it looked like
да, и вот
in the beginning,
таким
and
образом мы все вместе с коллегами, вот Кейт
this
здесь,
is and we have
высаживали
Kath
его.
as well.
Так, опять я улетела. Ну, простите, ладно, все.
Хорошо.
Да.
Хорошо, то есть, да. Но мы вернемся еще к
We'll
разговору.
get back
Спасибо
to
большое,
this
дорогая
case, to this story.
Никитина. И вот я так
Thank
поняла,
you,
что
Natalia. And
основные
as
вещи,
far as I
которые,
understand,
о
the
которых говорила
main
Наташа, такие составляющие для меня,
things, the main
это
features
очень
here
внимательное научное изучение,
are
очень точное
meticulous research
вот с
and
учетом точной географии города и места, и так далее, и
looking
вся
at
эта вот работа. Дальше восстановление
cityscape,
и
the
высаживание вот
geography.
этих
After
садов.
that,
И
you
важная часть, это,
reconstruct
конечно, о
those
которой
gardens,
вы уже
plant
начали
them,
говорить, это то, как
and
эту
also
историю, которая на самом
how
деле есть, как
you
ее не
present
потерять, чтобы не было
this
ощущения, что это
history,
просто какие-то
how
обычные,
you keep it
обычные
together,
там
how you
бамбуковые
present it.
черемухи, как бы носить
Otherwise,
всю эту
people would
историю.
see it as,
Я
simple
попрошу,
apple trees.
я попрошу
And this is where
Кейт
I'd ask
присоединиться к нашему разговору. Кейт Роузен,
Kath
давайте
Rosen
начнем
to
просто
join
с
our
вашего рассказа,
conversation, and maybe you could share
сделайте
your
ваши
story, what
презентации, и
you
потом
do,
продолжим дискуссию.
and you show your presentation, and then we'll carry on.
Hello, lovely to be here. It was really nice to see those photos of our trip to Columna. I think it was about 7 years ago now, but it was the most fantastic experience. We went with 3 staff from my charity in the UK, and including Amber, who's I think present. She works for another UK organisation now, but she will be presenting I think tomorrow. And I was lucky enough to bring my children as well. And it was just the most amazing experience to see the history of the pastilla, this apple product, being brought to life again. And I think, eating things from orchards is an amazing way to actually engage people in fruit growing, because you can eat nature. There's something very special about that. As was mentioned, we brought some trees over from the UK and planted some English varieties of apple, and I'd love to see what that orchard looked like now. I did actually meet somebody just randomly on holiday who was from Columna, and she knew about this orchard, so it was really special. And yeah, that trip was just incredible, because we went to visit Dostoevsky's orchard, Tolstoy's orchard, and they had the trees in Tolstoy's orchard are just they're huge. You can't get your hands around them. It was a mind-blowing trip for us. And sorry to just reminisce about this trip, but it's bringing back all these fond memories for me. One of the things that really stuck in my heart was watching my daughter, who was about 8 at the time, dancing with the Russian children and sharing their traditional folk dances. And then we brought some of our English orchard folk rituals as well, and people took part in that. So it was a lovely combination of the cultures. I'm trying to understand each other through food. So that was wonderful. Anyway, I'll stop reminiscing about that, and I'll tell you a little bit about my charity, which is called the Orchard Project. So I'm going to try and share a screen with you here. So yeah, I'm the chief exec of the Orchard Project, and we are 10 years old, roughly 10 years old, and we work in the UK to plant orchards in cities. So that's a typical kind of harvesting day, and the vision of our charity is that we want everyone to be within walking distance of a well cared for community orchard. I think we're the only charity doing that in the world, actually. I don't think there's anybody else who's focusing on community orchards. And we do anything we can to try and engage people in growing fruit. And for us, a community orchard can be very small. So it can be only 5 trees, up to hundreds of trees. But that enables us to plant in very small pockets of green space in the cities that we're working in. And we prioritise our work in the areas of most highest deprivation in those cities. because those are the areas of greatest need. So 75% of our work is in the areas of the UK which has the highest indices of deprivation. Yeah, so this is our vision. So at the moment we're working in 5 cities across the UK, in England, Scotland and Wales. And over the last 10 years, we've planted or helped support over 500 community orchards and worked with over 50,000 people to grow fruit. So we're still quite a small charity, but we have a big vision. And actually, we'd like to see this vision across the whole world. I'm going to talk through a little bit about our model of establishing community orchards, with the hope that this can be shared in other cities across Russia if you can find ways to do that. We found it to be a really successful way of planting and looking after the orchards. I'll just tell you a bit about why we plant in cities rather than in rural areas. And it's really because of the huge move of people from rural areas to urban areas. So by 2050, over 90% of the UK population will be living in cities. And I think by that point in Russia, it will be something like 75% of the population. So as human beings, we're all moving into the cities, but at the same time, we're getting disassociated from where our food is grown. We lack contact with nature, and basically we are natural beings. We need to have connection with nature for us to thrive. And through planting these community orchards, we enable people to have access to fresh fruit again, but also connect to nature. It's really important that within cities we plant trees, and if we can plant fruiting trees, that's even better. So I'm going to just flip through a few slides now about the impact that we found from our work. And then I'm going to read you, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to read you the testimonial of one of the beneficiaries that we've been working with, because it's a very heartfelt story. So I think this will illustrate the work we do better than me just showing you some statistics. But a big part of our work is around connecting communities. And just like I was saying at the beginning, where I felt like I could connect to people from Russia who I'd never met before, but we had this kind of almost spiritual connection through planting these fruit trees and enjoying the products of those orchards. And we find that hugely in our work. So the planting an orchard in urban areas, where people feel so isolated, and there's often a lot of social problems, it enables people to connect with people that they wouldn't normally talk to, and it's a very neutral activity to take part in. So people who don't normally talk to each other can plant trees and suddenly find they've got something in common, and it breaks down those barriers between different people in society, which is, I think that's one of the things that we most need as we face all these pandemics and climate crises. We need to be able to connect with our local communities as much as possible, so we can build resilience in our society. So a huge amount of beneficiaries are feeling more connected to their local neighbours through planting these orchards. I'll come back to this slide just to show you. And as I was mentioning before, just planting trees, being out in nature is a really very important part to feel positive about where you live. And nearly 100% of the people that we work with feel more positive about where they live through having a community orchard planted in that space. And as I kind of alluded to previously, we don't just plant community orchards, we restore older orchards, and we do anything we can to engage people in fruit growing. So we have parties in the orchards, we do picnics, we do lots and lots of harvesting. We've started up a community juice and cider project where we're harvesting waste fruit from London's orchards and turning it into cider, which we're selling. So that's a way of bringing in some income to those orchards as well. And one of the things that, one of the kind of traditional UK orchard activities that we do around the start of the new year, which we haven't been able to do, unfortunately, because everyone's in lockdown here, but we would normally be out in our orchards doing this thing called wassailing, which is one of the activities when we came to Russia as well. And it's basically a big party in the orchards in the middle of winter. You drink lots of cider, you do lots of symbolic activities like hanging bits of bread in the tree to welcome in the spirits of the orchard. And it's basically a pagan ritual to bring a good harvest for the year. And there's something about connecting with the past through those fruit trees, which is very special for people. So you can access a bit of that living history through being in the orchard. And yeah, so a very high percentage of our beneficiaries as well are feeling more connected to nature through planting and looking after fruit trees. This is actually a picture of Lizzie, who's our cider maker. And she's pouring some of the apples into this funnel, which is going to mince them up to make into juice and cider. And it's all done with volunteers. Now I think we've saved around 20 tons of food waste and made it into cider, which we're selling. So I'm just going to flip back to this lady who's called Ella. And she's one of our beneficiaries who's been involved in an accredited orchard training course, which is a long-term training course which takes about 6 months to complete, and it trains people in all the skills they need to start and look after their own community orchards. And Ella's involved in an iteration of this course, which is specifically aimed at unemployed people, because we're finding it, as well as feeling connected to nature and people in the community, working in orchards is actually a really good way to improve people's skills. And 30% of the people from this training course who are unemployed go on to paid employment. So it's actually using the orchard as a route into employment for some of the people who come from a very, very difficult backgrounds. Ella is, as you can see, she's a person of colour. She's a single mum, and she's got 2 teenage children who are just these very, very incredible teenagers, but she has quite a full-on life. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and read you. Hang on, I need to stop sharing it first. Hang on. Okay. I'm just going to read you out about her story of being on this course. So Ella says, the completion of the course in January 21 was a personal challenge and triumph. I didn't want the course to end. It become an anchor for my life. Throughout the pandemic, I greatly enjoyed a reason to escape in mind and body for my own learning and reflection time after home educating my children for 4 years. It was something lovely to look forward to. Freedom. Travelling across London once a month felt like an added bonus, and I saw London in ways I've never experienced in the usual hustle and bustle. Early on, I took an added element to the course and decided to create a community orchard at an allotment site. In fact, I planted 3 orchards, and that gave me the chance to experiment with low-tech forest gardening principles. The lockdown afforded me a different pace to explore in an unhurried, un-London way. 1 hour per day of exercise was often spent exploring nature around us as I passed the knowledge I'd learnt to my 14-year-old twins. It had a positive impact on me and the 14 families I supported with regular food deliveries from a food bank. And the orchard course was a personal catalyst for a feedback loop that could not have been planned, but was mightily welcomed. And nature has a map that society can follow. Oh, hang on, I'll just get back into my Zoom. I've got about 5 more minutes left, so bear with me. Okay. So yeah, there's something very beautiful about being involved in this work of orchards, especially in urban areas. And we hear stories like Ella's a lot. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how we deliver our work, especially around planting community orchards, with the hope that we can replicate this model in different countries. Or you might want to talk to me more. I'll leave my details at the end about how you could do this in your cities. But we've developed a bespoke model of support for community groups, and it's a long-term project. It's not just a plant in the ground, a tree in the ground, and leave. There's a big agenda around planting trees at the moment in the UK, and I'm sure in Russia. too. So people see climate crisis coming and they want to do something about it. So planting trees is a massive, people are really interested in it, but there's not much focus in the UK around how you care for those trees once they've been planted. And what we don't want to happen with our community orchards is that we plant these trees and then they just die, because it's actually sending kind of the opposite message of what we want to be sending from our work. So we work with groups for 5 years, and that takes them from the design of their orchard right until, you know, the trees are actually established enough to look after themselves. And we'll do lots of pruning advice. We do lots of training on organic pest and disease control, how to improve the soil fertility, what to do with the produce, you know, how to engage other members of the community through different events. And that's been, that you can see in the background here, we use this 3D design model, which has scaled fruit trees of different sizes. So people can put those little models of trees on a map of their area, and it's a way of visually being able to see what the orchard will look like when it's fully established. And we work with around 5 volunteers from that community orchard to train them in these skills. And the idea is that those people will cascade their knowledge to other people in the local community. And this has been a really successful model of support. And through this, we've had a 95% tree survival rate. So that's really, really high for tree planting. And in the UK, that's resulted in over 8,000 fruit trees, which are now in community use. And another part of our model is that it's really rooted in skills development. So here are a couple of our staff on training local people in how to look after fruit trees. But the training encompasses, it's a very holistic way of looking at how you manage community orchards. It's rooted in organic and permaculture principles. And we look at how we build the soil, because without healthy soil, you don't have healthy trees, and without healthy trees, you don't have healthy fruit, and then without healthy fruit, you don't have healthy humans, and and good wildlife in those orchards. So it's a very holistic way of looking at how to manage orchards. And we have, over the last 10 years, we've developed quite a few ways of giving people those orchard skills. So we have a kind of a very informal way of training, which through our orchard volunteers, who are called our orchard leaders. So those are people who do a kind of very light touch training course with us, and then we'll go and support them in the orchard to do pruning and aftercare for the fruit trees. Then we also run non-accredited training for the general public, so people can come on kind of orchard masterclasses. We've got one coming up in the next few weeks, which is actually, we've moved it online, but it's how to prune fruit trees, and we're trying to do that online. So I don't know how successful that will be, but we're trying. You have to adapt at the moment. And then we've been really focusing on developing accredited training, which is where people who go through this training will get a qualification. And as I said before, it's a very important step into work to put on your CV. But it's through that accredited training course, which is a longer term training, we've seen really amazing impact for the people involved in it. So we have this kind of network of people who all know about orchard skills within the cities, and they support each other. And we also use those people to go back to the orchards that we've planted, to give them some support if they need a top up of their skills. And this, I'm just coming on to the last point here, which is around forest gardening. And I don't know if this is a concept which is familiar to people in your country, but it's a way of planting orchards which incorporates lots of different other species which are also edible. So you create a kind of polyculture within the orchard system. And that has huge benefits in terms of climate proofing the orchards. So, for example, once you've planted your fruit trees, you can plant edible belts of trees around the orchards, so that when the wind comes, and we're experiencing a lot more wind and storms through climate crisis, the trees are protected from having these edible barriers around them. Or it can be planting edible flowering plants underneath the trees, which will help attract bees and pollinators and feed them with pollen before the fruit trees are in flower. So as we take the groups on this journey of community orchards, we're really trying to kind of push them into having more of a forest gardening approach. That's quite a difficult concept to get your head around for people who are just starting to plant fruit trees. So we're almost using the orchards, and I think in most people in any culture understand what an orchard is. It's just something kind of we spiritually know as humans what orchards are. So as people kind of get used to planting orchards and having fruit trees, we then take them on this journey into greater sustainability, so that they're so that we build sustainable systems. And the other thing about planting a more diverse forest garden is that it extends the season of produce in that orchard. So with orchards, you tend to get, the fruit all comes at once. Hence, why things like pastilla were probably invented, because you need to try and get rid of all of the, how do you deal with this glut of fruit that's coming all at once? You need to extend it somehow. And so if you're planting different cropping species that have fruits and products throughout the year, then you get to extend the season. And it's a really great way of teaching people about new food things that they can eat. And I think as nature and climate emergency really hits us, we're going to have to, be a lot more creative about what we can eat and what we can grow locally. And growing food locally is going to be a hugely important part of how we survive.
How did it go?
So that's the end of my presentation about the Orchard Project. But as I mentioned, we're really keen to help other groups to learn from what we've been doing, and do contact us. We've got lots of resources on our website, or I can talk to you directly. Nice to speak to you.
For God, help me.
Спасибо большое, Кэт. Да, и спасибо. Это очень важный такой практический опыт, и действительно, я думаю,
thank you, Kath. It's a very important piece of practical experience, and we have people writing in the chat. They want to ask detailed questions. Well, maybe our session is not long enough for a very detailed exchange, but still.
So my next question is,
I'm on next.
do you see the difference between what we have been told, the experiences of the UK and the experiences that we do have in Russia? So we in Russia, I think, sometimes we normally work museums together with city authorities doing something for the community. I think in UK they work with the communities together. Or so what, Natasha, what is the participation of volunteers and local residents in what you do? You said that there was a municipality representative on your photograph, and local people, are they interested? Do they participate? What is their engagement and involvement? Well, Fyokla, and we only have 7 minutes for the discussion, so I will be brief. We are trying to plant this good bacteria, and people start taking care of their ruinated front gardens. They get contagious with this idea of beauty. However, those spots of greenery in the museums. Mary, could you please switch off your mic, because I get a lot of interference and a lot of noise. Thank you. So people start buying plants, and this English garden, we have planted several trees that I mentioned. You mentioned the furniture company. Why would they need that? Well, that they just wanted they wanted to be sponsors, and they wanted, they don't have their names, the furniture center of this and that sponsored the garden. No, but people want to be part of something bigger. They want to be part of the process. So, well, the next step when you launch this place and this green place becomes nice and convenient, well, then you get artists, then you get theater people coming, people reading poetry there. So this English garden that I mentioned in Kolomna serves as a venue for an annual festival, where during the festival we learn and have activities connected to British literature. So you see, other cultural meanings can be then incorporated. So you see that this place, it's not no longer a simple garden. It's not an orchard. It's a place for activities and a place for leisure time. Yes, you see, if you say events, and as Kath said, events not only initiated by you in Kolomna, but also events and activities that find the place, that come there. Yes, you know, where you get these green lungs on the territory, they immediately get filled with those attractions. So what you're building, you're kind of building this bird house, you know, and birds are just coming, or you're building an ecosystem, right? An ecosystem which is like a nesting box or a birdhouse. So my question is for Kath and for Natalia, if there is enough time. You deal with orchards that don't necessarily have to do with historical legacy. It's just, you know, a good cause, a great cause, bringing people together. So how do you think museums and cultural institutions, would they benefit from doing something similar with their own territories? Would that provide an extra meaning to the work, even if the museums don't have to do with pastila or with apples and orchards? So what would you say?
Shall I jump in? I think I think they should definitely connect with fruit growing. If museums have got green spaces around them, then why not plant orchards there? And you can use orchards and fruit to talk about history and talk about heritage. And one of the things I didn't mention was that we often plant heritage fruit varieties. So these might be varieties that were traditionally grown and developed in that spot, but haven't been tasted or seen, for maybe 100 years. So you can bring back, it's a way of bringing back living history, and talking about, how people used to live. And I think that there's a huge connection with heritage and museums through orchards and fruit growing, actually.
Мне кажется, еще очень важно вот то, что сказала.
I think what Kath has just said is really important. Another thing, it's edible. You can eat it. You can eat from the fruit. You can taste it. It's extremely important that in every museum you can see that now it's direct involvement, direct engagement. Here I plant, and here I eat. I can touch it, I can smell it, I can taste it, and I think that's kind of a living museum piece. And Natalia, tell me, are you planning some interactive component? Not only we plan it, we have it in terms of the fruit. This bowl of jam that you saw, jam being made, it's this traditional recipe. Who's making the jam? Well, our gardener is making the jam. He's always there, and all the guests of the museum cafe, the cafeteria, get a taste for free. We treat them with this jam, and it's a nice bonus, an extra that you get with a cup of tea. Another thing that we had with our fruit, we have several plum trees, and we actually made drinks from that. We made liquor. We sometimes have evening events in the museum, and we treat people with those plum-based drinks. Everything that can be processed, and it's not difficult, and it's not extremely expensive, and then you get to use the crops and the harvest, and to it goes to the community in the end. Thank you. I think we have no time left, so Inna, I couldn't keep track of the chat box. So, Ina, is there anything, other questions that we should mention? I saw people writing about the Yekaterinburg orchard, but I think we will have this case tomorrow. Well, that's true. Maria Krupnik, I ask you to please join us in helping and help us with the chats in our broadcast. Are there any questions? No, there are none. But here you see people write about the Yekaterinburg case and also a case in Kachkanara in Urals, but I think we should better discuss it tomorrow, discussing other Russian cases. Well, to sum up, I would say that these two examples, one that directly has to do with historical legacy and heritage in Kolomna, and this scientific research, then reconstruction and then revamping or rebuilding the historical capital of orchards and the beauty, and the very important practical experience from the UK, where you plant, you seed, you interact in a completely different manner with your town, with your city. You actually you make your physical contribution. You seed, you plant a seed, you take care of trees, and the volunteers who actually stay with the initiative. When I hear that, I really want to learn from you, from that. Because let's say in Moscow, people are very abstract, they are planting trees on Tverskaya, and we just watch and wait them to die. And then other billions of rubles being wasted again of these extremely expensive initiatives, which you can't be a part of. It comes from above, it's something that comes from the government. So I think that the museums might think in that direction in their green places, creating and involving and engaging territories, the green places. If I got right what the talk was about, if I hope that I did. So I thank everyone, and we are now closing the session. I thank Natalia Nikitina from Kolomna. I thank Kath Rosen, and maybe Kath and Natalia would want to say a couple of final sentences to conclude. Natalia? Well, it's 2021 now, and it's an anniversary, 200 years from the birth of Dostoevsky, and what I will give you a quote, not a precise quote, but what he said about orchards. He said, the humanity will be saved and will be corrected by orchards. Another 150 or 200 years will pass and you will be reminded of my words, he said. I think we might be there, and Dostoevsky helps us. Well, some other 100 years we should add. It's been a century since he said that, and we still haven't been saved or corrected. So, well, I see that behind Natalia, from time to time we see the monument to Dostoevsky in Darovoye, his birthplace, and I hope we can see a reconstructed garden there very soon. So, Kath Rosen, maybe just a couple of phrases to conclude.
I think all I'd say is that, you know, we're all living through a pandemic at the moment, and we have another one on the horizon, the climate crisis, which is coming. And you know, if it's easy to feel very paralysed and depressed about the state of the world, and we need to find easy things for us to do, which are positive actions. And you know, planting trees, however that may be, and looking after nature, being in nature, are one of the small actions that we can take. So I would just encourage everyone to do that, if you're only for your own well-being, because we need to find ways to heal ourselves in a time of, you know, great uncertainty and yeah. But it's really lovely to see everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Спасибо большое, друзья. На этом мы заканчиваем сессию. Я организаторам
Well,
передаю...
thank you very much, and I give the floor to organizers and I say goodbye to you. Dokla, thank you. Natalia, Kat, thank you. So we are about to finish out today's marathon, and I'm now inviting Ekaterina Gondrabura and Mary Clear. Finally, we're all here live, and we are finally able to discuss the TED Modern case.
Well, thank you very much. All of a sudden, it's already evening and end of our the first day of our conference, and so our session is dedicated to the way vegetable growing has changed the life of many cities, and Mary Claire is the main, you know, character of our session. She's a legendary person for well, several decades. This movement of growing vegetables in urban environment has become an important lesson for